Welcome to the In Between podcast. I'm your host, Mel Barrett. Today, we're taking a hard look at a case that continues to generate an incredible amount of smoke and, frankly, a whole lot of fire. We are diving deep into the recent partial unsealing of the 2026 Department of Justice files regarding Jeffrey Epstein. I say partial because the passage of the Epstein Files Transparency Act in late 2025 was supposed to be a watershed moment for accountability. The bipartisan law co-authored by Rep. Ro Khanna and Rep. Thomas Massie gave the Department of Justice a strict deadline of December 19th, 2025 to release all unclassified records, documents, communications, and investigative materials related to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. However, instead of full compliance, the DOJ's handling of the release has triggered a massive political crisis, congressional subpoenas, and the abrupt April 2026 firing of Attorney General Pam Bondi. The DOJ has failed to follow the EFTA mandate with illegal redactions to protect powerful men. The EFTA contained a very specific ironclad provision. The DOJ was legally forbidden from redacting names simply to protect individuals from quote-unquote embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity. Redactions were strictly meant to protect the personally identifiable information of victims and survivors. Despite this, the DOJ heavily redacted the names of powerful third parties in the released emails and documents. For example, Rep. Khanna publicly called out the DOJ for redacting the name of a person who sent an email to Epstein describing a child who had, quote-unquote, just arrived. Lawmakers from both parties have accused the DOJ of blatantly violating the law to shield high-profile men from reputational damage. They also withheld documents entirely. Watchdogs, including the Democracy Defenders Fund, raised the alarm that the DOJ was improperly withholding documents entirely. It was revealed that the DOJ withheld at least 53 pages from the mandated release. Crucially, 18 of those missing pages contain the quote-unquote protect source FBI interview notes, which detail the survivors' allegations of sexual abuse involving President Donald Trump in 1983. The DOJ attempted to explain this away by claiming the documents were withheld because they were quote-unquote duplicates, a justification that critics and lawmakers blasted as a deliberate attempt to suppress politically damaging evidence about the sitting president. And still, the DOJ is withholding millions of pages. While the DOJ has dumped roughly 3.5 million pages of records, Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche admitted on the record that the department collected approximately 6 million pages related to the investigation. So this means over 2.5 million pages are still being withheld. The DOJ appears to have unilaterally narrowed the scope of its search, limiting the release to selected criminal case files while deliberately excluding vast categories of records that Congress ordered disclosed. This includes internal DOJ communications regarding how the case was handled, records of evidence destruction, and communications from DOJ leadership. And they're also shielding financial enablers. The EFTA mandated the release of documents showing how institutions facilitated Epstein's crimes. While some banking files were released, watchdogs argue that DOJ has held back critical internal communications, showing how banks like Deutsche Bank, which flagged Epstein as a critical risk internally but continued doing business with him, were allowed to bypass anti-money laundering and know your customer laws for years without federal prosecution. The DOJ's refusal to comply with the law has resulted in an outright jurisdictional war between the executive branch and Congress. Bipartisan members of the House Oversight Committee, furious over the redactions and missing files, subpoenaed Attorney General Pam Bondi to testify under oath about the botched release.
Like former Prince Andrew, Donald Trump attended various parties with Jeffrey Epstein. I want to know, were there any underage girls at that party or at any party that Trump attended with Jeffrey Epstein?
This is so ridiculous, and that they are trying to deflect from all the great things Donald Trump has done. There is no evidence that Donald Trump has committed a crime. Everyone knows that. This has been the most transparent presidency. He's the one that asked that those files
I'm claim my time.
be released.
I got your answer. You said there's no evidence.
Trump asked
Mr. Chairman, please stop the clock.
Stop
the clock.
The legislation. This is
Time.
this
I'd like
is
to take my
ridiculous.
time.
Time belongs to the gentleman from California.
Okay. I'm going to put up another document from a witness who called the FBI's National Threat Operations Center because I believe you just lied under oath. There is ample evidence in the Epstein file.
Don't you ever accuse me of a crime.
I believe you just lied under oath, and this is all on videotape. You said there's no evidence of a crime. I'm showing you. Here is a witness statement who called into the FBI's Threat Operations Center. He drove Donald Trump around in a limo. He overheard what Donald Trump said to Jeffrey on his cell phone. He was so angry, he was going to stop the limo and hurt Donald Trump. And he met a girl who said she was raped by Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. She later had her head blown off, and officers at the scene said that could not have been suicide. No one at the Department of Justice interviewed this witness. You need to interview this witness immediately. Epstein should rot in hell, so should the men who patronized his operation. And as we sit here today, there are over 1,000 sex trafficking victims, and you have not held a single man accountable. Shame on you. If you had any decency, you would resign right after this hearing concludes.
The gentleman has expired.
Amid the escalating pressure from Congress, the public, and the White House, President Trump fired Bondi in early April 2026. Following Bondi's exit, her former deputy and current acting attorney general Todd Blanche stepped up and effectively shut the door on transparency, stating that the DOJ intends to, quote-unquote, move past the Epstein files and arguing that the department has already fulfilled its obligations. Now, that's a lot to take in, but on a granular level, we can focus. This is obviously a massive, completely overwhelming story of global power and corruption. So I am choosing to focus on three things that seem very powerful to me. I urge you to do your own research, though. It could take years for one person to go through everything. But as a collective, doing deep dives on certain parts, we may get to some truth here. So for today, 3 parts. First, we're going inside the Metropolitan Correctional Center on the night Epstein died. We're looking at the guards, the cache, the internet searches, and what the DOJ Inspector General actually concluded. Then we'll detail what some of the victims have said about what Epstein and his cabal of powerful men, including the current sitting president, did to them. And finally, we'll head to New Mexico, where the bodies may actually be buried. Because what we just learned about the federal government's handling of the 7,600-acre Zorro Ranch is going to make your blood boil. So let's take a deep breath, grab your coffee, sit back, take it all in, and let's get into it. Mark Epstein has been very vocal and consistent in his stance regarding his brother's death. He does not believe Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide. Instead, Mark has repeatedly stated that he believes his brother was murdered and that the official narrative is the result of a cover-up. He completely rejects the findings of the Department of Justice and the FBI, which concluded the death was a suicide facilitated by extreme negligence at the jail. Mark points to the autopsy results, specifically fractures in Jeffrey's neck bones, like the hyoid bone. He and independent medical examiners he has consulted argue these injuries are more commonly associated with homicidal strangulation than a suicidal hanging. He has publicly criticized the federal government for a lack of transparency, arguing that authorities have released doctored or incomplete evidence, including missing or edited surveillance footage to hide what really happened to Jeffrey Epstein. Mark has claimed that his brother had highly damaging information or dirt on powerful political figures and wealthy individuals. He argues that this made Jeffrey a target for powerful interests who wanted him silenced before he could cooperate with prosecutors or testify. He remains highly critical of the fact that the primary focus of the DOJ's investigation was on the dereliction of duty by the jail guards rather than the manner of death itself. He has continuously urged authorities to reopen the investigation into his brother's death, stating his requests have been largely ignored. So let's dig into what actually happened in the days leading up to the night Jeffrey Epstein died, August 10th, 2019. A reminder, in 2019, the Justice Department was headed by Attorney General Bill Barr, appointed by then-President Donald Trump. Jeffrey Epstein is in the special housing unit. He's supposed to be checked on every 30 minutes. He's supposed to have a cellmate. Neither of those things happened. Instead, we have 2 guards on duty, Tova Noel and Michael Thomas. And according to the 120-page DOJ Inspector General report, what happened that night was a masterclass in dereliction of duty. Here is what the verified FBI and DOJ files tell us actually went down. At 5:42 a.m., and then again at 5:52 a.m., the FBI's digital forensics show that Tova Noel Googled the phrase, quote-unquote, latest on Epstein in jail. Less than 40 minutes later at 6:30 a.m., Epstein is found dead. Now, Noel denied doing this in her DOJ interview. She claimed she didn't remember it and disputed the computer logs, but the digital footprint is there. 11 days before Epstein's death, Chase Bank flagged a $5,000 cash deposit made by Noel. Investigators looked into it. The financial anomaly was severe enough to trigger a bank alert, yet it was seemingly left unprosecuted. And in November 2019, Chase Bank filed a formal suspicious activity report with the FBI regarding Noel's account. The bank noted a series of cash deposits totaling nearly $12,000. The largest single deposit, $5,000 in cash, was made on July 30th, 2019. This was just 11 days before Epstein's death, and only weeks after Noel began working in the special housing unit, or the SHU, where Epstein was held. Despite this red flag, newly released interview transcripts show that investigators did not ask Noel about these cash deposits during her DOJ interviews. And because Epstein had recently been taken off a suicide watch, protocol dictated that he be physically checked every 30 minutes. Instead of conducting these rounds, prosecutors alleged the guards sat at their desks just 15 feet from Epstein's cell. Evidence showed Thomas browsing motorcycle sales, while Noel shopped for furniture online. The indictment also noted that for one 2-hour stretch, both guards appeared to be asleep. Knowing they had violated federal protocol, Noel and Thomas willfully filled out and signed official quote-unquote count and round slips, falsely certifying that they had checked on Epstein and other inmates throughout the night. And this is the part that gives me chills, the camera feeds, which, by the way, weren't recording. They were just live streaming to a control room. And they showed a blurry orange shape ascending the stairs to Epstein's tier at roughly 10:40 p.m. the night before he died. The FBI wrote that they believed that this was Tova Noel carrying linens or inmate clothing up to the cell block. It was the last time anyone approached the entrance to his tier. Noel gave a sworn statement directly contradicting the FBI. She claimed she last saw Epstein alive shortly after 10 p.m. and swore she never gave out linen, ever, stating that the previous shift handled clothing. Epstein was ultimately found hanging from strips of orange cloth torn from prison-issued linens. So what happened to the guards? Noel and Thomas were indicted in November 2019 by a federal grand jury for making false records and conspiring to defraud the United States. That sounds pretty big, right? Well, in May 2021, they struck a deferred prosecution agreement under Joe Biden's Attorney General Merrick Garland. They formally admitted that they, quote, willfully and knowingly completed materially false count and round slips, end quote. In exchange for their admission, full cooperation with the Inspector General's probe, and 100 hours of community service, they avoided prison time. And after they completed their service, all criminal charges were formally dismissed in 2022. The 2023 OIG report, led by Inspector General Michael Horowitz, concluded that Epstein's death was a suicide facilitated by catastrophic institutional failure. The report detailed how extreme staffing shortages, a culture of cutting corners, and widespread apathy allowed the guards to abandon their duties. The OIG concluded that while the guards' negligence provided Epstein with the uninterrupted time and materials he needed to end his life, there was absolutely no evidence of a coordinated criminal plot or outside actors entering the facility to murder him. But the survivors weren't done with them. Just recently, a coalition of Epstein survivors filed a massive civil suit against the Bureau of Prisons and these individual guards. And that civil suit forced Tova Noel back into the chair for a sworn deposition. Unlike her initial DOJ interviews, lawyers finally grilled her on the record about the $5,000 cash deposit and those 5:42 a.m. internet searches. While the defense is fighting tooth and nail to keep those specific transcripts sealed, the pressure is definitely back on. We've established the how of Jeffrey Epstein's death, the staggering negligence, the sleeping guards, the broken cameras. But now we have to talk about the why. If you look at the evidence and conclude that Epstein didn't take his own life in 2019, you are immediately faced with the question of motive. Why would someone risk infiltrating a federal lockdown facility to silence him? The answer is compromise. Epstein didn't just run a heinous child exploitation network. He ran a blackmail operation. He collected leverage on some of the most powerful men in the world: politicians, royalty, billionaires, titans of industry. If Epstein went to trial, the discovery process alone would have exposed decades of financial crimes, international sex trafficking, and potentially treasonous blackmail material. So who would have the power to take him out? The reality is, a target list of suspects would read like a guest list to Davos. The people with the power to orchestrate that kind of hit are the exact people who stood to lose everything if Jeffrey Epstein opened his mouth. And who benefits most? Every single person in his little black book. The goal of silencing Epstein would be to ensure that the files, the tapes, and the lists of names died in that cell with him. But here's the thing about a paper trail that vast. It doesn't just disappear. Over the last few weeks, a new batch of Department of Justice and FBI files have been unsealed, and the internet is, of course, on fire. I'm seeing the headlines and I'm seeing your comments in the chat saying, the DOJ just released documents proving Donald Trump assaulted a 13-year-old. As investigators, we have to stop, take a breath, and look at the actual document. I need to be incredibly precise about what these files are and what they are not. The DOJ did not release a document concluding that the sitting president committed this crime. What they released were internal FBI interview notes, specifically a summary of a call that came into the FBI tip line in July 2019, just 2 days after Jeffrey Epstein was arrested. So I'm going to leave this to you to make up your own mind about what really happened. And hopefully in the near future, we will have more documentation to prove, one way or another, if the sitting president of the United States sexually assaulted a 13-year-old child. According to these newly unsealed files, and this was brilliantly tracked down by investigative reporters at the Post and Courier and expanded upon by legendary Miami Herald journalist Julie K. Brown, a woman called the FBI to report that she was one of Epstein's earliest victims. She told the agents that around 1983, when she was just 13 years old, Epstein lured her to a vacation condo in the Sea Pines resort community on Hilton Head Island in South Carolina. Her mother had offered her babysitting services to rental customers on the island, and that was Jeffrey Epstein's inn. The woman, labeled in the files as Protect Source, told the FBI that she was drugged and abused at that condo. She stated that for years, she only knew her abuser as Jeff, until a friend showed her a photo decades later. But the reason this specific FBI interview is making international headlines right now is twofold. First, the political cover-up. The DOJ, led by Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche, two of Trump's personal lawyers before he became president, didn't release the Protect Source documents as they were legally obligated to do under the Transparency Act. They claimed a duplication error. But after Bondi was subpoenaed to give a deposition in front of the House Oversight Committee, and right after Trump bombed Iran, Bondi and Blanche quietly released these files that detailed Protect Source's detailed accounts of what she alleges the sitting president of the United States did to her when she was a teenager. Julie K. Brown has been reporting heavily on this specific cover-up over on her Substack. She points out that the FBI received hundreds of tips when they set up the 800 number in 2019, and several of them mentioned Donald Trump. But instead of credibly investigating these leads, the DOJ buried them. Brown argues that this has been a phenomenal cover-up operation for decades, designed specifically to protect powerful men from accountability. And that cover-up just cost Pam Bondi her job. Bondi was fired, and immediately after, Todd Blanche stepped up as acting AG and essentially declared that the DOJ is not releasing any more files. They are locking it down.
Now, the Epstein files, you'd agree, not handled well? No, and I don't, first of all, I have never heard President Trump say that the Attorney General that anything that happened to her had anything to do with the Epstein files. And so, look, the Epstein files has been a saga that's lasted for the past year. And what happened when the President signed the Transparency Act is the Department of Justice has now released all the files with respect to the Epstein saga. And the Attorney General Bondi and I appeared in front of Congress voluntarily a couple weeks ago to answer any questions they had. We have made every single congressman, senator available to come and see any document, redacted, unredacted, that they want. And so I think that to the extent that the Epstein files was a part of the past year of this Justice Department, it should not be a part of anything going forward.
The files are making headlines because of what the survivor alleges happened next. According to the FBI's internal summary, the woman claimed that during this time period in 1983, Epstein introduced her to Donald Trump. The FBI notes state the woman claimed Trump forced her head down to his exposed anatomy, that she bit him in response, and that he subsequently punched her in the head and kicked her out. Now, this is a horrifying account, but as a journalist, I have to give you the full legal context. These are allegations made to the FBI by a witness. If you've followed this case for a while, you might recognize these details. The timing, the babysitting job, the specific nature of the assault closely mirror a 2019 federal lawsuit filed by a Jane Doe, whose attorney recently indicated she received a settlement from Epstein's estate. However, the specific claims regarding Trump from the 2019 FBI interview have not been proven in a criminal court. When you have an uncorroborated report sitting in an FBI file, especially one the Justice Department initially withheld from the public database, you have to look at the broader context. Does this fit a pattern of behavior? If we look at the public historical record regarding the 47th president, the volume of sexual misconduct allegations is, quite frankly, unprecedented. According to the comprehensive public logs, which anyone can view on Wikipedia, over 24 women have come forward over the decades with allegations ranging from inappropriate touching to sexual assault. So to understand the sheer scope of what has been alleged, we have to look at the categories. The first, established civil liability. The E. Jean Carroll case. This is the only case that has gone to a jury trial recently. A federal jury found Donald J. Trump civilly liable for sexually abusing Carroll in a department store dressing room in the 90s, and for defaming her when she came forward. The second category, allegations of groping and non-consensual touch, includes allegations from Jessica Leeds, who alleged that Donald Trump grabbed her breast and tried to put his hand up her skirt on a flight in the 1980s. Kristen Anderson alleges he reached under her skirt in a nightclub in the early 90s. Jill Harth filed a lawsuit in 1997 alleging that Donald Trump pushed her against a wall and groped her. Beatrice Kuhl, a Swiss model who alleged Donald Trump groped her in his suite at the Plaza Hotel in 1993. Lisa Boyne alleged that during a 1996 dinner, Donald Trump made models walk across a table, looked under their skirts, and commented on their underwear. Natasha Stoynoff, a People magazine reporter who alleged Donald Trump pushed her against a wall and forcibly kissed her during an interview assignment. Rachel Crooks, Mindy McGilvray, Temple Taggart McDowell, Karen of Virginia, Kathy Heller, Juliet Huddy, and Amy Doris. All of these women came forward with separate accounts alleging non-consensual kissing, grabbing, or groping at various events, pageants, or at Donald Trump's properties.
I moved on her, and I failed. I'll admit it.
Whoa.
I did try and fuck her. She was married.
That's huge news there.
No, Nancy.
Yeah.
No, this was marriages. And I moved on her very heavily. In fact, I took her out furniture shopping. She wanted to get some furniture. I said, I'll show you where they have some nice furniture. I took her out furniture. I moved on her like a bitch, but I couldn't get there. And she was married. Then all of a sudden, I see her. She's now got the big phony tits and everything. She's totally changed her look. I better use some Tic Tacs just in case I start kissing her. You know, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the pussy.
And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Grab them by the you can do anything. That's what you said, correct?
Well, historically, that's true with stars.
It's true with stars that they can grab women by the
Well, that's what it's. If you look over the last million years, I guess that's been largely true. Not always, but largely true. Unfortunately or fortunately.
And you consider yourself to be a star?
I think you can say that, yeah.
Third category, which is allegations from pageant contestants and includes inappropriate behavior in viewing. Samantha Holvey, Nina Laaksonen, Cassandra Searles, Victoria Hughes, Mariah Beato, Bridget Sullivan, and Tasha Dixon. These are former Miss USA and Miss Teen USA contestants who have alleged a pattern of Donald Trump intentionally walking into their dressing rooms while women and underage girls were in various stages of undress.
I mean, some of these foreign girls, you know, Mr. Trump, in my country, we say hello with vagina. And,
well, you could also say, as the owner of the pageant, it's your obligation to do that.
So you have done that. Now,
I'll tell you the funniest is that I'll go backstage before a show.
Yes.
And everyone's getting dressed and ready and everything else. And, you know, no men are anywhere. And I'm allowed to go in because I'm the owner of the pageant, and therefore I'm inspecting it. I'm inspecting. I want to make sure that
You're like a
everything is
doctor.
good.
You're there.
Yeah, the dress. Is everyone okay? They're standing there with no clothes. Is everybody okay? And you see these incredible-looking women. And so I sort of get away with things like that.
And finally, other allegations of misconduct and assault include Summer Zervos, a former Apprentice contestant who alleged Donald Trump kissed her aggressively and pressed his genitals against her. Alva Johnson, who was a former campaign staffer, alleged Donald Trump forcibly kissed her. Jessica Drake was an adult film actress who Donald Trump allegedly grabbed, kissed her without her permission, and offered her money to come to his hotel room. And last but not least, Stormy Daniels. I don't need to tell you much about that case. It's a staggering list. And while Donald Trump's legal team has vehemently denied all of these allegations outside of the E. Jean Carroll verdict, framing them as politically motivated smears, the sheer number of independent accounts makes the FBI's protect source notes from Hilton Head impossible to simply brush under the rug. Before we leave the topic of historical patterns, there is one more piece of the public record regarding the 47th president that we have to look at. It's one of the oldest, and it came from inside his own home. During the couple's highly contentious 1990 divorce proceedings, Donald Trump's first wife, Ivana Trump, gave a sworn deposition. The details of this deposition were later made public in the 1993 biography, Lost Tycoon. In that sworn testimony, Ivana described a 1989 encounter with her husband where she felt quote-unquote violated and explicitly used the word rape. Now, right before the book was published, Ivana released a statement walking it back. She clarified that while she did feel violated and the tenderness of their marriage was absent, she said, quote, "I do not want my words to be interpreted in a literal or criminal sense," end quote. Years later, during his 2015 campaign, Ivana defended him entirely, but the original sworn deposition from 1990 exists in the legal record. And when you combine that with the E. Jean Carroll verdict and the dozens of other women who have come forward, the anonymous protect source FBI notes from 2019, well, they stop looking like an anomaly and start looking like a piece of a much larger, darker puzzle. And we're talking strictly about the Epstein files, the actual court documents, flight logs, and private emails unsealed over the last few months under the Epstein Files Transparency Act. So we need to be incredibly precise about what they say regarding the 47th president. When you comb through these thousands of pages, a very specific picture emerges. It is the picture of undeniable proximity, contradictory timelines, and a glaring question of exactly what he knew and when. Here is exactly what the unsealed files reveal. I'm going to break this down into three categories: the 2024 depositions, or the casino detour. Let's start with the victim's sworn testimony from the Giuffre versus Maxwell civil suit, which was unsealed in early 2024. In her 2016 deposition, Johanna Schoberg testified that she was on Epstein's plane when a storm forced them to divert to Atlantic City. She testified that Epstein said, quote, "Great, we'll call up Trump and we'll go to the casino," end quote. When lawyers explicitly asked Schoberg if she was ever directed to give Trump a massage, which we know was the network's code for sexual services, she firmly answered no. And second, the Mar-a-Lago recruitment ground. The files definitively established that Epstein used Trump's private club as a hunting ground. The documents confirm that Virginia Giuffre, one of Epstein's most prominent victims, was just a teenager working as a locker room attendant at the Mar-a-Lago spa in the summer of 2000. That is where Ghislaine Maxwell spotted her, befriended her, and recruited her into the trafficking ring. And in 2025, Trump made an admission of sorts. This detail became a massive political flashpoint last summer. In July 2025, President Trump spoke to reporters on Air Force One and admitted that he ended his friendship with Epstein specifically because Epstein was poaching young women from his club. He told reporters, quote, "I said, listen, we don't want you taking our people." And then not long after that, he did it again, and I said, "Out of here," end quote. There's a timeline discrepancy here, though. The problem with that defense is the paper trail. Trump claims he kicked Epstein out not too long after the 2000 incident with Giuffre, but club records unsealed in the files show Epstein remained a member of Mar-a-Lago until 2007. And third, the 2025 email bombshells. And this is what I'll call the dog that hasn't barked. The most explosive mentions of Trump didn't come from the victims. They came from Jeffrey Epstein himself. In late 2025, the DOJ released a massive tranche of Epstein's private internal emails, and two of them immediately made international headlines. In the first, April 2011, Epstein sent an email to Maxwell discussing the media fallout. He wrote, quote, "I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Redacted spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned," end quote. And Maxwell replied, quote, "I have been thinking about that," end quote. And then there's the 2019 email to Michael Wolff. This even more damning email surfaced from January 2019, sent by Epstein to author Michael Wolff. Referencing Trump and the girls recruited from Mar-a-Lago, Epstein wrote, quote, "Of course he knew about the girls, as he asked Ghislaine to stop," end quote. Now let's break down why those two emails are so critical. The White House has aggressively pushed back, stating that the unnamed victim in the 2011 email is Virginia Giuffre, and reiterating that Giuffre has never accused the president of abuse. And legally, that is true. No criminal wrongdoing has ever been established against Trump in connection to this ring. But look at Epstein's own words, quote, "Of course he knew about the girls," end quote. The files don't currently show Trump as an active participant in the abuse, but they paint a devastating portrait of a man who was deeply embedded in Epstein's social orbit, who knew young girls were being pulled from his own resort, and who, according to Epstein himself, knew exactly what was going on and simply looked the other way. Now, some powerful folks do say that there was criminal wrongdoing established against Trump in connection to this ring. In early 2026, U.S. Representative Ted Lieu stated that unredacted files related to Jeffrey Epstein contained, quote, "highly disturbing allegations," end quote, of Donald Trump raping children. During a February 2026 press conference and subsequent public remarks, Ted Lieu claimed that Donald Trump's name appears thousands of times in the Epstein files and referenced allegations that Trump raped children and threatened them. Lieu highlighted an FBI intake document in which a witness claimed a girl was raped by Trump and Epstein, stating, quote, "He, the witness, overheard what Donald Trump said to Jeffrey on a cell phone about a girl who said she was raped by Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein," end quote. Lieu then called on the press and the Department of Justice to investigate these allegations and criticized the DOJ for not pursuing them. In a separate context, in July 2023, Representative Lieu entered into the congressional record that federal judge Lewis Kaplan confirmed a jury's finding of sexual abuse/rape in the E. Jean Carroll civil case against Trump.
So why are Republicans so interested in Bill and Hillary Clinton? It's because they're trying to distract from the fact that Donald Trump is in the Epstein files thousands and thousands of times. In those files, there's highly disturbing allegations of Donald Trump raping children, of Donald Trump threatening to kill children. So I encourage the press to go look at these allegations, and I'm highly disturbed that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche just got the law wrong. Yesterday, he said, essentially, that it is not a crime to party with Jeffrey Epstein. Well, that's actually not correct. If Jeffrey Epstein was human trafficking minors for these sex parties, and you show up and patronize the establishment at that party, yes, you're guilty, because patronizing is part of the law, of the federal sex trafficking law. So Deputy General Todd Blanche just got that wrong, which maybe explains why they aren't investigating all these folks, including Donald Trump. He needs to read the law and investigate these people. He also needs to resign, not only for not knowing the law, but a massive, not only screw up, but the biggest privacy violation in history. They release a lot of pictures of minors unredacted, just violated the privacy of these girls. It is uncalled for what they did. The one thing that they could not do under this law was to invade the privacy of these women now, who were girls at the time, who were victims of sex trafficking. Also, he met with Ghislaine Maxwell, moved her to a minimum security prison, and then got a puppy for her. So for all those reasons, he's just got to leave the Department of Justice.
So take it with a grain of salt, but take it in. When you have that level of proximity to the most prolific trafficking ring in modern history, the public deserves total transparency. And I know that that's what Ted Lieu was trying to get at. And also, that's exactly why the New Mexico Truth Commission subpoena power is making so many powerful people sweat right now. We're going to keep pulling the thread on these 2026 unsealed files, because whether it's Epstein's guards or the highest office in the country, the truth always leaves a paper trail. And after a quick break, we're going to talk about what's happening at the Zorro Ranch in New Mexico. If you think the negligence stopped in New York, you need to hear what happened in New Mexico. In July 2019, right after Epstein was arrested, local prosecutors in New Mexico started doing their jobs. Then Attorney General Hector Balderas launched a state-level investigation into Zorro Ranch. They were tracking leads, talking to survivors. Then the feds in New York picked up the phone. They told Balderas to stand down. They said, quote, "We have an active multi-jurisdictional prosecution. A local probe is just going to get in our way," end quote. So Balderas complied. He handed over the state's evidence, shut down his probe, and stepped aside, assuming the DOJ was handling it. And keep in mind, in 2019, the actual head of the DOJ was Attorney General Bill Barr, who had been appointed by then sitting President Donald J. Trump. So let's fast forward to early 2026. A massive trove of federal documents is unsealed. And in those files, in a December 2019 email from a federal prosecutor to Epstein's estate, I want you to read the exact quote regarding the Zorro Ranch. Quote, "Federal agents have not searched the New Mexico property," end quote. So let that sink in. The federal government actively stopped local law enforcement from investigating a known trafficking hub, and then they didn't even bother to execute a search warrant themselves. And what makes this infinitely worse are the uninvestigated claims buried in those 2026 files, including an uncorroborated, anonymous allegation from 2019 that 2 foreign-born girls were murdered and buried in the hills outside that ranch, and the feds just left it sitting in an inbox. We always talk on this show about accountability, and right now, New Mexico is furious, and they are actually fighting back. Just a couple months ago, on February 19th, 2026, New Mexico's current Attorney General, Raul Torres, officially reopened the criminal investigation into Zorro Ranch. Torres is not asking nicely anymore. He is demanding immediate, unredacted access to the entire federal case file. But it's not just the Attorney General. The New Mexico State Legislature just unanimously passed a resolution to create a bipartisan truth commission. And here's what you need to know about the commission. It's chaired by a Democratic representative named Andrea Romero, who has been incredibly vocal about getting justice for the survivors. And this truth commission is armed with subpoena power and a massive $2.5 million budget. They aren't just looking at Epstein. They are looking at the public corruption. They are asking the hard questions. Why wasn't he registered as a sex offender in New Mexico after 2008? Who looked the other way? What local officials were complicit? The ranch was sold in 2023 to the Huffines family, who have stated they are fully cooperating with authorities. But the land holds secrets, and for the first time in years, someone with actual subpoena power is going to start looking for them. This is a heavy one today, guys. We're obviously going to keep tracking the New Mexico Truth Commission as they start issuing those subpoenas. The survivors who were trafficked through Zorro Ranch deserve a complete public record, and we're going to do our part to make sure they get it. So let's keep the conversation going. Share this episode. Talk about the Epstein files. Join me on Newslight with Mel Barrett on Wednesdays on YouTube as we continue to talk about this. I am not going to let this go quietly into the dark night. Until next time, I'm Mel Barrett. Let's stay vigilant. Let's keep asking the hard questions, and let's look out for each other. Thanks for listening. The In Between podcast is written, edited, and hosted by me, Mel Barrett, and is a production of Ruby Grace Productions. Special thanks to my mentors Amber Hunt, Ellen Marsh, and Rebecca Lavoie for their super smart guidance and support. If you want ad-free exclusive content, bonuses, and lives, head on over to the In Between Podcast Patreon and sign on up. The intern level starts at just $4, and there's over 100 ad-free episodes for you to binge right now. You can watch my new show, Something's Off, with Rebecca Lavoie over on YouTube at Something's Off Pod, or listen on Patreon. Episodes drop several times per week. And please tune in on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern to watch my new panel show, News Light, on YouTube, where we talk politics and the latest news affecting all of us. And if you'd be so kind to like, comment, subscribe, rate, and all the things, it's super helpful for my shows and moves my content up in the algorithm. If you appreciate my work, please don't forget to tip on Venmo at Mel Barrett Writes. That's Barrett with 2 R's and 2 T's. Thanks for watching and listening. I appreciate the support so much.